What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue with our 2025 college football schedule preview and very early projected record series. The Michigan State Spartans are up next. Before we look ahead to 2025, let's take a look back at what Michigan State did in 2024. Here are my projections and predictions last year for Michigan State. My projection had this team at 5-7, and then in my prediction for them, I had them going 5-7 as well, and that's what Michigan State did. This team coming off a 5-7 year in 2024 under first-year head coach Jonathan Smith. Yes, it was a new era for the Spartans last year. Not a bad season for Michigan State. I mean, it's a pretty reasonable prediction and also a pretty reasonable record because of a first-year head coach and starting from a new era and everything. So yeah, 5-7 year for Michigan State in 2024. This was their schedule from last year. First off, you look at who they played in the non-conference. They played Florida Atlantic, Prairie View A&M, and then on the road at Boston College. They lost to Boston College by 2 points. That was a pretty close game. Just imagine if they would have won that game, this team would have got off to like a 4-0 start going into conference play. Well, they actually played Maryland to begin conference play, and they won that game. So you look at their Big Ten schedule from last year. First off, you look at the home games. They played Ohio State, Iowa, Indiana, and Purdue and Rutgers. They ended up beating Iowa and Purdue. That was the only 2 wins, or actually that was one of their 2 wins at home last year. And then on the road, they played Maryland. They also played Oregon, Michigan, and then Illinois. So their road schedule was pretty tough. They beat Maryland, but they lost to Oregon, Michigan, and also Illinois. So yeah, pretty tough schedule last year for the Spartans, but what does it look like here for 2025? Well, here is that full schedule, and before we go game by game, let's take a look at who Michigan State will play in the non-conference this season. So this is their non-conference schedule. They will play Western Michigan, Boston College again, and then they play Youngstown State. So they play Boston College again, but this time they will play them at home. So that does kind of favor Michigan State a little bit. I still think it will be a close matchup, but yeah, Boston College will be a home game there for the Spartans. And then the 2 other games is where Michigan State definitely should be favored in. Youngstown State is an FCS team, and then Western Michigan is a Group of 5 team. Don't know if they're solid or not, but yeah, Western Michigan there in the non-conference. So that is your official non-conference schedule. Let's take a look at their home games in the Big Ten. They will play at home against UCLA, then rival Michigan, and then, of course, Penn State. So yeah, home schedule is kind of tough. You know, UCLA is definitely a winnable game. Michigan, the rivalry, of course. Michigan could be a top 25 team this year, though. Yeah, Penn State, though, that's going to be definitely the toughest home game, in my opinion, here for the Spartans. Penn State considering to be a top 10 team. And I know they probably should have like 4 home games in the Big Ten this year, but they're actually playing 1 neutral site game in the Big Ten, which we'll get to now here on the away schedule. They will play their true road games, though, are at USC, at Nebraska, at Indiana, at Minnesota, and then on the road at Iowa. So those are their 5 true road games here in the Big Ten. But then they got Maryland here on a neutral field. That game is going to be in Detroit, so it's not considered a home and away game, but it is out of their home place, and it's also out of the Maryland's home place as well. So yeah, 5 road games in the Big Ten. 3 home games in the Big Ten as well, and then you got that 1 neutral site against Maryland and Detroit. So that is your away schedule. Let's go back to the schedule now and go full game by game now for Michigan State. They will kick things off with Western Michigan on August 30th. Then they got Boston College on September the 6th, and then Youngstown State on September 13th. So they play 3 non-conference games to kick off the season in the first 3 weeks. There's a pretty good chance that the Spartans can get off to a 3-0 start, but it could also be 2-1 depending on what happens in that Boston College game. Then they jump right into Big Ten play. They'll play on the road at USC on September 20th, and then they get their first bye week before going back on the road to play Nebraska on October 4th. So they got back-to-back road games there with Nebraska and USC, but they get a bye week in between those 2 weeks. So yeah, back-to-back road games there on September 20th and October the 4th. Then they got UCLA at home on October the 11th, then back on the road for Indiana on October 18th. And then they play rival Michigan on October 25th. That'll be a home game there for the Spartans. And then they play Minnesota on the road on November 1st. Then they get a bye week here before playing Penn State at home on November 15th. I really like that bye week spot there before playing a potential top 10 team in Penn State, maybe also even a top 5 team as well. And then they go back on the road to play Iowa on November 22nd. Then they'll close things out with Maryland on November 29th at Detroit. So you look at this schedule for Michigan State, it's pretty tough, but the schedule this season is not quite as bad as it was from last year. I mean, they got Ohio State. You know, they don't have to play Ohio State or Oregon this year, which I think is good news, but you got Michigan, Penn State. Those are probably going to be a potential pretty tough games, and then you got back-to-back road games there with USC and Nebraska, and then you got Indiana on the road. Yeah, pretty tough schedule, but Michigan State probably could have a better season. You never know, but let's get to the projection here for Michigan State for 2025. This is the scale I'll be using here for their official projection. If it's basically a 1% game in the red, that's going to be counted as an automatic loss, and then your 20% games in the orange, that's where Michigan State will be a double-digit underdog. 40% in the yellow, that's where they'll be a less than a touchdown underdog by 6 or 7 points. And then 50-50 games, those will stay in the white, games that really could go either way. 60% in the purple, that's where they'll be favored by less than a touchdown, so about 6 or 7 points. 80% in the blue, that's where they'll be favored by double digits. And then your easy wins are pretty much in this percentage at 99%. So we'll start with those easy wins here for Michigan State. I think you got a couple of those. You got Western Michigan and Youngstown State on August 30th and September the 13th. Yeah, Michigan State definitely should have no problems in both of these games. Again, I don't really know how good Western Michigan is at the Group of 5 level. Maybe they're pretty solid. You never know. They could probably give Michigan State some problems, but I don't really think so. I think Michigan State will be favored in both of these games by at least by 20-plus points. Youngstown State is definitely going to be an easy game because that's an FCS team. They definitely have no business to lose that game either. So yeah, both of these games I think are in that 95 to 99% range. And then you look at the rest of the schedule, you really can't favor Michigan State in any of these other games, especially in the Big Ten. They also can't be favored against Boston College because they got beat by them last year. So yeah, we go to the games now where Michigan State is going to be an underdog because most of their games are going to be underdogs in almost all of them. Now, some of the games are not in the red, but we do got one game here or maybe a few games in the orange. We will start with those, though, Indiana and Penn State. These are the two games that will be in the orange for me for Michigan State. Indiana, just because it's on the road, that's the reason why it does drop here into the 20% range. Yeah, Indiana was a pretty good team last year. I kind of expect them to be pretty good. Maybe not quite as good as they were last year, but you never know. Kirk Zanetti's doing a pretty good job down there. And then you got Penn State. That is going to be a pretty tough game at home for Michigan State. So yeah, Michigan State will definitely be a double-digit underdog against the Nittany Lions. So yeah, these two games, I think you can put Michigan State as a double-digit underdog, so we're talking about a couple of touchdowns, maybe by 10 to 14 points. And then you got a lot of games here in the yellow where they're going to have a chance to win, but they will also be tough. You got USC, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Iowa. These are all road games here in the yellow. That's the reason why they drop in the 40% range. USC, that's a very tough place to play. Same thing with Nebraska. They do got back-to-back road games there with USC and Nebraska, but they get a bye week in between those two road games. And then Minnesota, that's a very tough place to play. Same thing with Iowa. These are all very tough road games here, but I think Michigan State will just be a 6 or 7 point underdog. They'll definitely have a chance to probably, win one of these games perhaps. But yeah, USC, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Iowa, these are all games that Michigan State will be a 6 or 7 point underdog. Then that's going to leave you with 4 50-50 games. Boston College, UCLA, Michigan, and Maryland. This game on a neutral field, so that's the reason why it's a 50-50 game. Now, Michigan, I was really close to putting that as a yellow game there for Michigan State. Now, I did Michigan's projection back then and put it as a purple game, but I decided to change it. It's not going to change the projection, though, for Michigan at like 9-3 when I did their projection back then. It was probably back in February when I did Michigan, so yeah, the projection doesn't change, but it does change to a 50-50 game because Michigan State's playing at home. Plus, it's a rivalry game. Michigan State perhaps can pull off the upset. You never know. And then Boston College, that's a home game there for the Spartans. I know they got beat by them last year. If it was on the road at Boston College, it would definitely be a yellow game there for Michigan State. And then UCLA, I think, is a pretty even matchup as well. So those are your 50-50 games. So let's now get a projected record here for Michigan State based on how tough this schedule is. Well, we count a couple of green games as wins, and then you count the 2 orange games against Indiana and Penn State. Those are counted as losses. And then you average out these 4 games in the yellow at 40%. Average out the 50-50 games at 50%. And odds would say they probably split them. They probably win 2 out of the 4 50-50 games, but that's only going to give you a total of 4 wins. So not a great projection here for Michigan State at 4-8. This is a tough schedule. Again, they're going to be double-digit underdogs against Indiana and Penn State. So that's probably the reason why the projection is so low for them. And then also the fact that they're going to be clear underdogs in all 4 of those games against USC, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Iowa. But if they can win one of those yellow games here, then odds would say they probably go 5-7, but if they can probably win 2 of them, they can probably go 6-6 and make it to a bowl game. I can definitely see Michigan State doing a lot better than this. It would not shock me if they did make it to a bowl game. Based off of what they did last year, going 5-7, they can absolutely get to a bowl game at 6-6. I think best case though right now is 5-7. Worst case probably like 3-9 or worse. If they do 3-9 or like even worse than like 4-8, then yeah, that's going to really be a disappointing year for Michigan State. But as of right now, the projection is 4-8 here for 2025 for the Spartans. Do you guys agree or disagree? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below about Michigan State. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.